On the count of five, four, three, two, one. I think we are live. Hello and welcome to wealthlessons.club, a podcast channel where we talk to first generation entrepreneurs from all over the world and learn from them how they built their first businesses and why. So today with me, I have a very interesting guest, Joseph Abraham. He's the CEO and publisher at SaaS Industry Media, the website of which is saasindustry.com. He's from Silicon Valley, and I think we accidentally bumped into each other on LinkedIn, and then I found his internet property for saasindustry.com very fascinating. It has a huge following on LinkedIn, and that piqued my curiosity because I have never interviewed somebody who has or runs a tech industry media company. And that's when I thought, you know what, having him on this podcast and learning about this entire space, about this business, the business models of tech media, and more will be interesting. And that's how I approached Joseph, and he was quite generous to take the offer, and he's here today. So, hello, Joseph. Welcome to Wealth Lessons Club. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ravi. Thanks for having me on the show. Very generous of you to invite me.
So the privilege is mine too to have you, and we got to know some common connections as well. Joshua being one,
Absolutely.
Rajesh Sethi being the other. Um, yeah. So before we jump into the meteor stuff, why don't you? I mean, really curious about your career trajectory and what led you to be where you are today in your career. Maybe a short uh, sojourn or a journey through your career would be helpful.
Great. So, back in the day in college, we didn't know what is entrepreneurship, but couple of friends and me, we jumped into the whole entrepreneurship bandwagon with a simple, very simple value proposition that our friends were not getting placed, and we had the opportunity to get placed. So we saw there's a gap, and there was enough and more training already provided, but there was a gap. And so there's a good family friend of ours who owned a college. So we said, hey, let's do something for you, and if you improve your numbers, in terms of employability, then that's going to really like benefit all of us. Win win win. Back in the day, we never understood what is product market fit and all of that, but we went ahead, we designed a program, we ran the program, and his institution actually saw a big surge in numbers in terms of people getting jobs and stuff like that. So we knew that we were onto something, and of course, we were absolutely new to the game, nascent. But that gave us a lot of leverage because we explored different things. We did things what the traditional businesses wouldn't do. So it was a good run, back in the day, and but it was a fun run. And
Which kind of college was it?
these are engineering colleges, and across spread across India, right? So um, and so that led to me starting my own outfit out there back in the day, and from there, it was a logical transition for me to move. I mean, college businesses were only that much, and back in the day there was no ed tech that was booming. I mean, so it was just going out there and helping colleges and getting out there. So it was quite interesting to see the whole run, and then we tried to launch a product back then, which was too early for the market, and so it didn't take off. So I entered the corporate world. I joined a premier institute called Great Lakes. I was heading their corporate sales, and from there I moved to Royal Bank of Scotland, where I was heading their whole assessment centers for leadership. And so RBS was a good run. And when I joined RBS, I met few startups, and I was helping few startups to understand how to foray into enterprises. And that's where this whole thing stuck, that startups usually don't target enterprises and mid markets. they and especially SaaS startups. So it was an interesting question that I was asking, and we said, hey, why don't we actually do something for revenue attribution, in terms of mid market and enterprises. And so I started off helping few of them, and that what I started as help became a business called Growth Fluence. And from there, we felt the logical, way forward from there was to actually create a media house, because we saw that a lot of startups didn't have a place to actually talk about the point of view, and share what they're trying to do. And this is not understood by enterprises and by other people, right? So when we talk about digital transformation, it's nice to hear these words, but very specifically people don't understand. Like when you say that I have a AI driven HRMS platform, I mean, a VP HR or a CHRO doesn't understand. I mean, they all use these words very loosely, but it doesn't mean anything. And it's either FOMO driving it, or it's peer driving it. So there's a peer pressure, and so they fall into it. But that's why we feel that product adoption, has a very big problem. And so we really felt that a media house that actually amplifies these stories, that moves away from founder centric narratives, that moves away from product centric narratives, towards customer centric narratives, would actually do a lot of help. And so that's where we are today, Ravi, with SaaS industry. But SaaS industry is a lot bigger than that. We'll talk about that as we interact. But yeah, I mean, that's where we are at this point in time.
Yeah, I would like to double tap on some of your decisions, right? That is very important. So
You're right.
you were with Royal Bank of Scotland. What was the nature of your job there, and where was it?
So this was in Chennai, but this is a pan India role. A leadership role where the whole role was about selecting the next set of leaders who would actually go up the ranks, into managerial cadre. So who would be probably be heading business units, probably heading functions, and so on and so forth. So to identify them, to actually look at homegrown talent and stuff like that. So that was my role, specifically to identify people like that, and work with them. So we call
Got
it as leadership assessment center. So that was my role. Yeah.
And it seemed like a very good role. But what was bugging you? Like why did you want to do something more, or more than this? Like how did growth fluence, or any what was like bothering you? Did you want to be on your own, or what led you to
I
leave?
think once you start off, and once the entrepreneurial bug bites you, I think it's pretty difficult to survive the corporate world.
Got it.
I think everything was well. I mean, I don't think, if I have to see it very objectively, there was no complaints
Got
with what was happening. But I think there was this innate dissatisfaction, that you could do something more. And so the point is that when you become an entrepreneur, you explore a lot of things. You're able to express and explore a lot.
right.
That gets extremely limited, once you get boxed in. I think that was
Right.
probably like itching me deep within.
Got it. And so once something is itching you, usually there are multiple areas, okay, ideas, okay. So you have
Mhm.
at least three or four ideas brimming in your mind, right? So how did
Yeah,
you so, so how did you pick on an idea, because it comes at an opportunity cost, right? And I always
absolutely.
this is my favorite question that I ask first time entrepreneurs whenever they pick on an idea that they want to invest a good part of their future in. It comes at it's a first of all, it's a risky proposition, and you never know whether the idea, should I pick an idea one or idea two. And
Right.
sometimes there's just one idea because they're so possessed and obsessed about an idea. It's usually that. But then there are sometimes that there are multiple ideas, and you just want to get started and you do not know which one. So how did you know? Was this something that you were sure about, or maybe you talk a bit about growth fluence and then media houses?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's good. Like we started as an agency, in fact. So in fact, it started as a small time advisory. I was helping few companies, and Josh introduced few companies from the valley. I was helping few companies here in Chennai and in Bangalore, right? So the interesting thing that happened is that uh, when I was helping these companies, what
Helping with
we
what?
had,
Helping with what?
yeah, so I'm getting specifically with that. So helping them in couple of areas, right? One was to have a strong messaging, point number one, and second was to help them to get into mid-market and enterprise revenue attribution. So let's say there was a business, and let's say there was a product, and if they were targeting, let's say, small and medium businesses, my value that I would bring to them is to help them cleanse some enterprise logos and move from logo play to revenue attribution play, right?
Right.
Because a lot of them actually struggle with enterprise attribution game because they think the sales cycle times are longer, and that's absolutely true. But actually, you can shorten that if you know how to actually run that. So there were a few aspects that I was helping them specifically with. So one was account-based marketing. Second was helping them, with a martech stack optimization. So choosing a martech stack, what is needed, for go-to-market or for growing and stuff like that. Third was analyst relationships. So somebody who raises Series A definitely has analyst relationship, but they don't know how to leverage that. And fourth was the events game. So you invest a lot into events, but you don't know how to leverage the game. So I saw these are the four areas that the investments were happening pretty high. uh,
Right.
when I say account based marketing, it was not directly account based marketing, but content marketing, where a lot of money was spent into content marketing, but there was no way it was tied into something that could actually have a straight line value. And second aspect, as I said, was okay. All this is great, but what is this Martech tool? I mean, the stack that you need to make this into a reality, right? So people would buy bloated Martech stack. So they would have, let's say, CRM. They would have a marketing automation platform, and probably have you know a lot of orchestration platforms. They would probably have a content marketing platform, a digital asset management platform. I mean, all this is nice to hear, but not aligned really well, because these decisions usually are taken by a marketing team, and they don't have marketing ops, tech ops running it, right? So usually they try to put all of this together, and they run it, but they see very less value. So in fact, we're trying to solve this whole problem, like how can marketing align with sales. And I
Right.
was helping both IT businesses and SaaS startups specifically, and that's how I actually forayed into SaaS. I never knew about SaaS, but as I started working on this, I started getting introduced, so one led to the other,
Got it.
and that's how it started off.
But you were
So
into leadership assessment. How did you gain a knowledge about this industry on how to help companies with this account based marketing and analyst relationship? What was your grounding or preparation for this kind of consulting?
got it. So I think there are three factors here. One is, even though the word leadership, is a little misleading, it is more about understanding competencies of people. So let's say if I have to like select somebody to head risk, right? Then it was about understanding everything about what risk entailed, and the same goes for marketing, sales, and so on and so forth. So I do understand the role, the scope, what they need to be achieving, how it ties on, how it gets tied to OKRs, and so on and so forth, right? So that was my role. But more than that, being an entrepreneur earlier, I understood what sales and marketing really meant, at a ground level, because I was heading enterprise sales for Great Lakes, right? So that was my role out there. But more specifically, if you really look at it, it was more about me sitting back in my desk, leading this function, but also interacting with vendors and wondering why, we still use legacy systems, where there are beautiful, companies out there with great products, but we are still stuck with legacy systems. Like, for example, if I have to ask somebody to change and add a couple of fields, for a form, it would be a change request that would take, like, say, 3 months or 4 months, and I had to pursue it like really bad. And always there was this itch that why things are not getting fast, right? So
Right.
there was a big gap. The gap was that SaaS companies didn't understand procurement.
Right.
They didn't understand buyer center. They didn't understand whom to tap into. So actually, if you ask me honestly, I still believe that enterprise sales is very straightforward, very linear, and easy to crack. It's not as complex as people make it to be,
Right.
but people are used to doing this SDR, and handing over to pre-sales runs, that
Got it.
they actually don't know how to like approach enterprises. And so
Got
our
it.
game was more about helping companies to know how to approach enterprises, how do you use analyst relations. So again, people have this wrong misconception that if I pay, let's say, if I pay an analyst firm for 5 years, sixth year I would automatically be part of the reports, and that's not
Got
the case. Like, you have to influence the analysts, you have to show them what value you're bringing to the table.
got it.
You'll have to actually create those kind of case studies, right? So all those things get missed, and so the game gets missed, and there's a lot of money that's left on the table. At the end
Right.
of the day, investors are looking at internal rate of return. And if you actually crack, let's say, a mid-market enterprise deal, you straight away
Right.
get about 500 to 1,000 licenses, which is again a great, translates into great internal rate of return. So, I mean, these are the things that the back of my mind, and whatever I was helping them with was very valuable. So it's more like being an insider. I understood how enterprises work. So
Right.
it started as an advisory. Then I
Right.
came out, I started it as an advisory plus execution firm. That's why I said there's an agency part to it, there's an advisory part to it.
Got
And
it.
then the more I worked with SaaS, I realized that there are much, much bigger gaps out there, which is what I felt that we can set out. So the TAM was pretty big. And not just the TAM, I mean, TAM is a fancy number, but I think the greater thing there was that the need was very, very big. So when I talked to founders or first time founders who are raising Series A, they got the money, but they have no clue what to do. So in terms of scaling marketing or sales, so these are real time problems. I mean, of course, you can happily like go and declare to everybody I raise money and all of that, but how are you going to show growth, right? And what is the straight line to growth? That becomes challenging. And I think usually people think, okay, if I hire a team, I hire somebody who led growth, let's say in a similar startup somewhere else, they would
Right.
come and do the magic, and the magic never happens that way, by the way. So they burn a lot of money. The customer acquisition cost is pretty high, and so this is where all these problem statements made us think, what is the best approach forward? And so I think we got a clear understanding of what is needed. So while we call us as a media house, we in fact are a tech company. I'll talk about it in a bit, but
Right.
that's where all these problem statements led us to this place.
Got it. So you began with advisory and agency, and then at one point of time, you saw a big opportunity, and
Yes.
then and when did you move to the US? By the way, from was
So our
the
office, yeah,
you
I
said
mean, I'm in Chennai, Ravi,
you are in
but
Chennai. Okay.
we are our offices in the US. We operate in
Got
US, in Germany, interestingly, right, and in
it.
India,
In
right.
where?
So these are three places. Yeah.
Did you say Germany?
Yes. Yes.
Ah,
Absolutely. Yes.
nice.
So there are three business partners.
Okay.
There's me, and there's Krishna Javaji, who's from Germany, and then there's
Ah,
Ben, right? So we three operate, in that format. Yeah.
got it. Got it. Okay. So, and these business partners were already helping you with the advisory and agency before, or they came in later?
Yes, yes. So I mean, Krishna Javaji, interestingly, was one of our clients,
Okay.
and he and me, we gelled really well. And he said, "Hey, I really think we could actually expand this in a much much bigger way." And so we all
Got it.
came together. Yeah.
Okay. Then help us understand what SaaSindustry.com is, and how did this advisory and agency move into this media? So, what was the vision like? Maybe if you can share the vision and stuff like that.
So I think I'll clearly define what we are doing at SaaS Industries. So SaaS Industries is at the intersection of media, research, intelligence, and SaaS management. So we're trying tying all of this together. So very specifically, the vision was very simple. The vision was that SaaS companies, spend a lot of resources and money on selling. Um, and the whole challenge for them is that they for them to start seeing the lifetime value translate into real reality, it takes time, because there's a lot of uh, you know there's a lot of marketing and customer acquisition cost that goes right in the beginning. But for them to start looking at converting the trials into real time customers, because most of them use a freemium revenue model, becomes extremely challenging.
Right.
So one of the things that we found is that they do so because they want the user or the sponsor to use the product and find the ROI, and
Right.
then adopt to the product, right? So there's a product adoption scale, cycle, and they want to basically be able to say, hey, if they found a value metric or time to value, is calculated, and say, hey, this is the time to value, and then we start charging them from here.
Right.
The challenge that we found is that they're not able to articulate the value very clearly, right from day one. And so what we found is that a lot of founders said, hey, back in my head, I have a very clear point of view, but this point of view is not getting translated. And it's not getting translated because of three or four reasons. And that's why we started the first aspect, which is media house. So the first aspect is storytelling, right? So the challenge that most of the startup founders have is, how do I help my customer segments understand what we exactly do, and how are we different from our competition, and why should they care about us? These three
Right.
questions, is not answered very crystal clear. So if you go to any website today, it talks more, it's very product centric, or it's very founder centric ideology, right? We want to do this, we want to do that, but customers are trying to solve their own use cases, and they want to know how does this specifically apply to us. So the challenge is that there's so much of content that's created every single day. So if you took a look at the content stack, it starts right from blogs all the way going to white papers and so on and so forth. So much of content that is created, webinars, podcasts, and all of that. But when we talk to enterprise customers or mid-market customers, what they complain is that it's not clear to us. So that is why we have to inflate our buyer center.
Right.
So CMO has to involve IT director, has to involve so many other people, to conclude a decision, right? But if it was pretty easy for them to understand what it does, it works. So for example, take account-based marketing itself. It sounds fun, it sounds big, it sounds massive, but how many of them really understand what is account based marketing and what are the tools that they need? Like, they should be able to purchase a tool after they have a process clearly mapped out.
Right.
Sadly, today they buy a tool and then they map a process after they buy a tool. So
Right.
it goes for everything, right? And see, every tool out there, every product out there, they want you to adopt. And so they make you to actually, pick and do things the way they want you to do. So they actually infuse their narrative into your way of doing things. But you have a tech stack, you have data that they should talk to each other, you have integrations that need to happen, but that is not well thought through, right? So what we have understood is that it's not very clear, right? So what does customer centric narratives in simple terms means is, how does this platform really help a use case? So for example, how does a CRM help a mid market manufacturing company, right? What does it do? Like, how can it really help? So when you specify it that way, I think a lot of it changes. So that's why we felt we need to have a media house that amplifies these stories, right? And then that media house also, we have a magazine on our Apple Store, and it's a digital first magazine, and it's a digital native magazine both on iOS and Google Play Store. And apart from that, we also run events, but these events are very private events. So we would actually get decision makers to come, and then we run these events. The second part, research, is more about running reports. And these reports are market reports, tech reports, and ROI reports. So again, helping companies to amplify their story much better. The third part is intelligence. That's what we're building as a tech tool, wherein we want to help buyers get vendor intelligence, and we want to help sellers get buyer intel. I mean, what the buyers are looking for, what's the landscape like. So every time, just to give you a quick context here, every time somebody invests into a company here in India, a SaaS company, and if it's a Series A, one of the criteria that goes into the investment is that you have to do USGTM. That
You have to
sounds
do
great
what?
on your USGTM, a go to market, US go to market.
Ah, US GTM. Okay.
Yeah, now that sounds nice. That sounds great. But the question is, how are you going to do it? So, are you going to target West Coast? Are you going to target East Coast? Are you going to like target the same kind of retail shops you're targeting here? Or are you going to be so that becomes a huge challenge, and a lot of times it's trial and error. So instead of that, is there a way to actually find intelligence of a similar competitor who's doing something there, in US, and then be able to like plan your whole GTM strategy? So a lot of weak linkages are there, and we really feel that that could be really fixed through the intelligence. And the last part is SaaS management, procurement, right? So just like how you have a Dun and Bradstreet number for any IT company out there which does business, or SAP Ariba code, right, from a vendor code. There's nothing like that for SaaS. So the challenge that is there as an enterprise decision maker is, hey, are you secure platform? Do you have SOC to compliance? Are you compliant? Are you you know what do you say, where are you storing my data and privacy? How will the payment terms be, right? So there are specific aspects that enterprises and mid markets want, which is not found anywhere, right? So we are trying to create this platform that could be easy to pay, easy for procurement, easy for SaaS companies to find. Similarly, enterprises can come and put their problem statements out there, and SaaS companies can give the point of view, or they could give a proof of concept and then convert those trials and demos into real-time customers. So that's the logical journey that we are taking. The focus where we are moving towards. But the media house helps us to break ground much quicker. We can talk to anybody much quicker, get the data that we need, build a large data lake as quickly as possible.
Right.
Um, you know um, and and that will help us in getting data enrichment as quickly as possible. The reports help us because we also see that, of course, we are not trying to compete with analyst firms, but we see there's a lot of gaps in the analyst firms as well, that you have to be a subscriber to be part of those reports. I mean, even though they deny it straight hand, but that's the reality. So I see that a smaller startup, let's say from Gorakhpur in UP, would find it very difficult to actually get into any of those places. And so there's no way to benchmark them. So again, G2.com is not built for enterprises. G2.com is a straightforward small business play. Like small businesses go see, hey, it's nice, peer reviews, all of that. But when it's an enterprise play, they want a third party, proper researched, somebody following a research methodology, creating a proper hypothesis, having a proper peer review, and then producing that, and having a larger inclusion in that sense. So I think these are the things that we're looking at solving, Ravi, from a long-term point of view. But at this point in time, we are a media house, and we do research, and we're building an intelligence platform. But ultimately, we want to be into the SaaS management space.
Nice. So you mentioned about storytelling and point of view. That reminds me of
Yeah.
one of my favorite book, Play Bigger. I do not know.
Yes.
I'm sure. Yeah. So it
Christopher
talks.
Lockheed. Yeah. Yeah.
Was that? Yeah. So it
I said
talks
Christopher
about
Lockheed.
yes. So it talks about the power of having a point of view, because many startups do not have a point of view. Okay,
Do not
they
have a
cannot,
point of view.
and they cannot. That's why they cannot stand out in a cluttered marketplace, even though they have it in their pitch deck, they have it in their vision statement. That does not translate to a messaging outside, um,
True.
and and that is what you are trying to do that. Do that.
Also,
Uh,
it goes
yeah.
little beyond that, Ravi. So in a sense that, just to give you a perspective, so today everyone's competing to actually be a category king. The
Right.
challenge with being a category king is that anybody can dethrone you any point of time,
Mhm.
and anybody can create a new category and then circumvent you, right? But
Right.
what we really want SaaS companies to do is to build movements.
Right.
Movement is something that SaaS companies don't understand the power. Like for example, how HubSpot built a whole inbound movement, right?
You're talking about
How
movement. Movement.
movement, yes, movement,
Okay.
yes, creating a movement, right, which is larger than like everything, and it has a shared value. So people actually connect because they have shared values, and it is not necessarily like it's because there's a category aspect to it, which is like an element of, hey, what can you do for me? What, and it gets kind of categories kind of get boxed, but movement actually is something that surpasses all of it. So we want to also create movements like that. Like no code is a movement today, right? Which Notion started. I mean, Notion amplified it. Of course, they didn't start it, but they amplified it. Similarly, if you are able to like create movements, the adoption is going to be much bigger, and everybody feels that they want to be part of this movement. You create more movement leaders, and that becomes really big, right, in its own way. So again, that's a big missed opportunity that we see start, SaaS founders not tapping into, and that's a place that we want to tap into.
So, but SaaS founders latch on to a movement instead of, I mean, it's very
Yes,
hard.
creating. Yes.
It's very hard to start a movement. Okay,
Yep.
you need to be disruptive in a way that you begin a movement. But to be fair, not everybody can start a movement.
True.
What you could
True.
smartly do is keep yourself attuned to what new movements are coming up, and then latch onto it. So something of
True.
that sort. Be an early adopter and gain the benefit and advantage of being the first mover there. Right? I mean, Web
True.
three is a movement.
True.
NFT is a movement. Crypto is a movement, and that's when the early
Yeah.
adopters are jumping into it.
So, for example,
Yeah,
what happens, Ravi, what we have seen is, like, say, for example, let's take product-led growth, right?
right,
Now, everybody I talk to, they keep using this, and it becomes a lingo, right? It's like it makes somebody feel that, okay, they are relevant, right?
right.
But the challenge there is that when you're actually creating something like that, it actually loses its power. So let's say, for example, if you have more than like 50, 60 people talking about it, then it's no longer it doesn't have its power that it used to have, because you become a early majority, right? You're no longer an early adopter, you
Mass
become an
market,
early
yes,
majority or late majority, right, in that sense.
right.
So we honestly feel that anybody who has raised series B or series C, has the power to actually create, because those threads are there, right, to create and its movement is again about not the technology, but about what actually is really happening from a socio point of view, right, socio techno point of view, and that gets missed heavily is what I'm emphasizing here, Ravi. Yeah.
So you mentioned no code as an example of a movement
Yeah.
that you think Notion was the first one to begin with. Or
Not necessarily, but they actually. Yeah.
do you have another
Not
example
necessarily.
of a movement?
So it could also be like, as I said, Slack and product-led growth, right? So everyone, like, if anybody and everybody would quote Slack, right? Say, hey, Slack, product-led growth. I mean, it's very synonymous, and you can't actually separate them, right? So uh, that's how we see some of them actually disrupting. Like, for example, even take SaaS as a movement. I mean, I really believe SaaS as a movement, and the pioneer of that would be Salesforce, right? So they actually pioneered and said, hey, we will do fractional pricing, we will go full cloud, right? So I think those are the movements that are out there. And I honestly, like, for example, let's take the payment space, just to give an example. Today there are enough and more payment fintech companies, and there's enough and more spaces to actually create movements there. Like, so for example, there could be a whole movement of one touch banking, right? And that could be a movement in itself, like saying, hey, if companies have to do business, it's a single window business, you can just do one touch banking. And once you start doing that, then you start seeing you're leading the way, because today the challenge is people want to be category kings, so they always use this comparison narrative, or they do a leadership narrative, right, which is good, but it's not sustainable is what we feel. But yeah,
Right.
I think we're dwelling too much on this specific thing, but yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
which is
that's
which is,
something
which
we
is
want to
okay. Which is
amplify.
okay. No, which is good to learn. Okay, but you could have continued consulting with all of this. Instead, you are creating a playbook that you are offering, and the media, the tech media house that you are creating is becoming the platform to offer all of this as playbooks, right?
True, true,
And
true.
okay, and so So how did you? Because it's again, it's a lot of upfront investment, right? You have to build. Uh, so it has to be organic. You need to have people writing a lot of content about this industry, and SaaS
True,
is there are hundreds of players, right? How do you
true,
decide on priority on what to publish? Because there are at least a few dozen companies that are built every day, isn't it? So
true.
how do you keep yourself sane without stretching yourself too thin? How do you prioritize what kind of content to create and stuff like that?
Great. So I think just to give you our content framework starts with what hypothesis that we actually build, right? And whether the hypothesis gets tested out. So for us, we're slightly different from traditional media houses because traditional media houses report what they see, and let's say after a point of time what they see was not the right reporting, then they would actually retract it and say, hey, sorry, we published this wrong, but this is not what it is and this is what it was. But rather what we want to do is we want to ensure that we are able to help companies in the right direction. Like for example, should a SaaS company do GTM, in Middle East? Because Middle East is really a booming market at this point of time. There's a digital transformation wave that's growing really, really big. But should a SaaS company really invest their time and resources? Like for example, Zoho has invested a lot of resources right now into Middle East.
Mhm.
So the those are big questions to ask. Second, like so we take very strong questions that form good hypotheses. Like for example, we loosely talk about remote work, but what is the compliance around remote work, right? Let's say US company offering somebody, in Vietnam a job. What is the compliance framework for it, right? Similarly, we loosely use words like Web3 or blockchain, and we say access management could be coupled with blockchain. Is that really a reality? I mean, everyone talks very futuristic, but what is the reality, ground reality today? To what extent could there be an adoption? So we want to pick those stories which are either regional or marketplace or industry specific or technology specific, right? And then once we have this hypothesis, then we want to go through a proper research methodology as to getting the data and then like evaluating the data and then coming up with our own conclusions, then going to storytelling. So in fact, for us, reports become main piece, and from the reports come all other storytelling, that could be like stories on our site and stuff like that, right? So for example, nobody talks about SaaS in China. Have you ever wondered why nobody talks about SaaS in China? I mean, how many articles have you read about SaaS in China? And in fact, SaaS in China is a mature market, by the way. But the interesting part is nobody exports or ships code from China. They go to Singapore and export it from there, or they export it from Taiwan, whereas the holding company is sitting in China. So it's
Right.
actually very, very, very interesting to see how these things work. And a lot of reporting ends in who raised money, who acquired whom, or more about like, so we do cover these news as well. It's not that we don't cover, we also keep it relevant, but we want to go to more deeper stories. So when we even create our magazine, these stories flow from the reports, which is much well researched, and then it flows into other places, right? Rather than it being, so we're not under any pressure to actually publish stories because we have to have a cover story for April, then we need to have XYZ that can get us traction. Okay, so very important thing, Ravi, I forgot to mention what creates this basis for us is we are not interested in being a mass media house at all. So for us, we are not interested in big numbers. For us, we want to be a niche media house, which means if we publish something, we only want decision makers to read it. So our distribution channels that we have created, are is not very mass. That's why you will see we not putting out so many things out in the public. But we use chamber of commerce, we use associations, we use already established distribution centers to distribute our content by doing co-branding or by working on a way methodology that can get it distributed. Because end of the day, when somebody is investing with us for a report, let's say, they want this report to be read by the ICP, right? As simple as it gets. And that ICP should be
What
a
is
decision
ICP?
maker. ideal customer profile, right?
Ah,
Uh,
okay. Okay.
yeah, and they should be a decision maker, and it should influence the sale. That's what they're interested in, and that's why we are putting so much of effort in creating a report, right? So instead of it being mass, wherein it's a hit or miss, like you publish it, let's say 100,000 people receive the email, and you can show so much open rate, so many people received it, but 99% of it, what we believe, is irrelevant in mass media, completely irrelevant, because there are only specific people who need it, and we focus on delivering it to the specific people. So that
Give, give me an
mechanism is
example.
all.
Give me an example of a report that is niche, and how do you co-brand it? Like, give me an example.
Yeah, great. So for example, let's take customer success. So people use customer success for adoption, right?
Right.
We're saying customer success could be a very strong ground for retention. Of course, people understand this narrative, but they don't understand it with data, right? So we take this, right, and we, let's say there's a customer success platform that partners with us for this report, right? Once we create this report, right, so we would actually go with the whole thing. We create a hypothesis, we mine the data, we look at what literature is already available on it, we run our surveys, we run our focus group discussions, and we evaluate it to come up with a report. Then we actually distribute this report with only 100 to 150 decision makers. So let's say, there's partly narrative building for this company as well, but we have editorial guidelines and we have editorial direction. So it never trumps that. So we always have a leading hand there. But we actually infuse a little bit of narrative there into the essence that it stands true, right? You're not trying to go beyond blurred lines whatsoever. So in that essence, if you really look at it, we would distribute it to 150 decision makers. How would we distribute it? Through, let's say, Southern Indian Chamber of Commerce, right? And there are several other places that we distribute this through. And we then call, for us, we do round tables to brief the report. So report is done, report briefing is done. So it's invite only. It's a beautiful experience. So we send handwritten notes with a wine bottle. We invite them. We talk about the report, and we ask them questions. It's like a nice event that follows with the report. So the report now gets distributed. It gets discussed, and now this narrative is permeated into the whole system. So
Got it.
this is the way that we actually create content and disseminate content in that
So
sense.
this is a push model, okay, where you have a report ready and now you push. Usually, the regular means is if somebody wants to have customer success as installed in his
Yes.
company, he would go Google and then he would see who are the players, and then he
Yes.
go to individual vendors and download their white papers, and he has
True.
5 to 6 white papers, and then that helps him make a decision, right? So is this also a model for, like, I mean, would we be able to go to you through the Google, through SEO, and reach out to these reports, or
Yes.
that's
So
not
in
the
the
model?
So that's why we're building the intelligence platform and the SaaS management platform, wherein
Okay,
all of this gets into one single place, like a repository, right? And every company has a profile, which is verified. Like I love how CB Insights has a mosaic score, which is very relevant for an investor. Similarly, there is no
sorry,
SaaS score.
sorry,
Like for example,
sorry, I missed it. What is that example? Who's Sebins?
CB Insights
CB
is
Insight. Of
the
course. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
CB Insights has this mosaic score model, which
What
is
is the
very
mosaic score?
relevant. Mosaic score is their own proprietary algorithm, which gives
Uh-huh.
a score for each company, right?
Okay.
And it's used by different. There are different use cases, but mostly investment houses use it to arrive
Uh-huh.
at, is this company investable or not, right?
I see.
It could be growth rate, it could be the pedigree, it could be from an angle of like what's really happening in the company, proprietary technology, and so on and so forth, right?
I
Now,
see.
interestingly, there's nothing like that for a SaaS score, right? So it's pretty interesting. Yeah. So you benchmark companies with momentum, market, money, and management.
I see. So what does this course offer?
So these
Like,
scores are so
yeah.
basically the scores would be, would you want to do business with these companies? Because there are different parameters. You could do a spider diagram and find out, or you could probably get a score out of it, and say, hey, I think these guys have good management, they have they have right now the runway to service. See, so the problem is when you're actually working with a Series A company and you're an enterprise, you're always worried, right, on whether they'll give me support, right, whether I will have a support team, right, whether
or or,
there's runway
or
for them.
or will they exist in the next
Will they even
5 years?
exist? Yeah. Do they have runway, right? So will they shut down and stuff like that? So the CB Insights Mosaic score is very, very interesting to actually get those numbers. But today, the biggest adopter of CB Insights is the investment houses. It's still not permeated into the enterprise space at this point of time. Of course, enterprises use it, but a lot of investors actually use it, right, to come up and say, hey, I think is it investable or not, right? At least when they do their initial due diligence, they do like consider CB Insight score. Similarly, we really feel that SaaS companies, the score goes way, way beyond this. The score is more about, as I said, what is the support team like? Are they SOC2 compliant or SOC3 compliant? Where will they store my data, right? So if it's a European company, of course they want, I mean, everybody says that, hey, we are compliant, GDPR compliant, or this compliant, but where do you really store the data, right? um, will you be open to integrations, right? Who are your top 10 customers, enterprise customers? Do we have anything on them? Is there an ROI score from them? Is there a cost benefit analysis already done? So when you actually cover all of this, your sales cycle time reduces considerably high. We're actually, this is not a new playbook. We're picking this straight from SAP Ariba. So Ariba is a platform for procurement for, let's say, chemicals, or so on and so forth. So a chemical plant would actually have completed all of it to get a vendor code generated. Once a vendor code is generated, then you can only share. You just need to share your vendor code. Makes it much easier to transact and do business. SaaS companies fail, with that because they don't understand how vendor management and procurement usually happens in larger companies, and they struggle with it heavily. So they're only slicing and dicing into business units. So they would probably sell 50, licenses to, let's say, a particular business unit, and probably they'll still use the logo there, like, hey, we have given it to, like, say, Walmart, right, or Walgreen or whatever, right? So then they would use the logo. But you had an opportunity. Let's say you already did something with Walmart, so why can't you now expand and actually get this as one of the preferred vendor, in that space? And why can't all the salespeople use the same CRM? So an enterprise usually has at least close to about 10 to 15, same tools in a category, given category. There is a lot of room for consolidation to happen, right? So these are the spaces that we feel that this could happen. Again, it's more than that people searching for it are a pull model, Ravi. I think it's more about influence, and it's more about peer influence, and what a third party would say about it, right? It goes without saying. So that's why Gartner and Forrester is quoted left, right, and center, because it becomes like it becomes a sacred thread. The problem that we have with Gartner and Forrester is they don't give you the data model, right? If they, let's say they're calling somebody a leader, they're not giving you like a raw data to show you how did they call somebody a leader.
I mean, they explain their entire the four the magic quadrant, right?
The,
So they explain
the
why something.
quadrant are the waves. Yes. The question is, how did they choose only the 25 companies?
Hmm,
What if there was an innovative company like lurking in Thailand,
right.
right? So the sample size, right, becomes a big question. And second thing is, how did they actually? What are the scores? See, usually when you put something out there, and you're proving it, you're supposed to give the raw working data, in saying that, okay, now you can run your own pivot tables and arrive at it. We have a proprietary model, but this is the data that we have crunched. So, for example, Fortune 500 companies is never contested because it's public data, and all the data is already available, right? And based on the available public companies,
Right.
they create a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 or whatever list they want to create. So it is up out there for anybody to go and check it. But
Right.
when it comes to analyst firms, none of it is available. The only place you can go and complain is to them again, right? They have an office where you can go and come. I mean, they have a specific place where you can go and complain and say I have a problem. And that's why also they're dragged into courts. So if you look at the number of cases against these analyst firms, there's many in US. And it's very, very interesting to see how companies have said, hey, how did you actually compare me with this company where what I am doing and my technology is very, very different from that company, and you
Right.
put me in the same category and I'm not that, by the way. So it
I have
becomes very,
seen
very
that.
murky in that sense.
So
Rather than that,
I've seen that. I've seen that in some of my past startups that I have worked. I mean, I'm
yeah,
not talking about the big analysts, but then there
yeah,
are the small analysts who just
yeah,
create a report or a blog post, and then they would create a table, and then
right.
they hardly know us, and they would
Yes.
slot us into a block. And I have had these conversations where I had to comment, "Hey, did you do your homework well?" and stuff like that. So I completely
Absolutely.
understand. Yeah,
Absolutely. So we honestly feel if you create vendor profile where somebody can claim the profile and they provide data, and enrichment doesn't come necessarily only from you, but from their side as well, right? And they're ready to actually share my 10 top 10 customers. We go into cost benefit analysis with all the 10 customers. We run it through them, ask them like, what it is. This is what the company is saying. So it becomes much easier to get a given ROI score based on the sample size of 10 companies. I mean, we are very, very, very clear, and that makes it much easier to do business with them rather than creating so much of content, right? That we are this, we are that, this white paper, that white paper. So it makes it very, very easy, because how, as a company, as a decision maker, what do you want to know?
right,
Who have you helped? What is that impact you've created there, right? Will the same impact be created for us? End of the story. So I think that is missing heavily in today's space, when everyone talks about their own, like everyone says, hey, I'm good, I'm big, I'm greater, I'm awesome. And this is again very difficult for somebody to process this as well. So when you went search also, I'll end with this. When you search, Ravi, it's again, what kind of search terms are you using? I mean, whether your semantics are effective, it's getting matched with the keywords and stuff like that. And in more than, we want to move away from that model where people can come and search, but be able to get good recommendations based on similar profiles, right? So there's a lot of matching that needs to go. Of course, I don't want to call it AI right now, because everybody uses that term very loosely, until unless you don't have a large data lake and there's a proper machine learning algorithm that runs for a number of like iterations, you can't come up with good predictions, right? So we want to build that and be able to recommend the right kind of companies out there, because the variables are not surface level. The
right.
variables for enterprises are much more deeper, right?
Got it.
So that's how I would see it.
Okay, so when you decided on this to build this, because it will only mature over time, right? So the more data
Yes,
sets that you have, the more
yes.
profiles that you have. So how did you decide on a runway, and did you have an existing business already to fund this? What was your
Yes.
business model like?
So our advisory business actually helped us to actually make a very decent um, corpus, right? To actually be pursuing what we're trying to pursue. So for us, the advisory also became a good place to actually do user interviews, understand what SaaS founders want, understand what enterprises want, where is the real struggle, what data points are not getting covered, where is the failure with media, where is the failure with analyst firms, where is the failure with SaaS spend, platforms that are out there where they track your spending and so on and so forth. So like we understood what is the real challenge, and we
Right.
created a good like hypothesis to actually pursue this.
Okay.
And then what we are doing even now is we are actually without scaling, we are still selling everything in a manual mode. So the reports could also be like, say, consolidated together and sold, but instead of that, we're trying to like sell this one to one, understand. So this gives us enough and more understanding of what the market wants, how it responds, and so on and so forth. And building the platform according to us is actually the easiest thing, because you can actually do API pulls from Crunchbase, which they allow you to do, by the way. You can pull API pulls from Apollo.io and enrich profiles. You can do API pulls from ChargeBee, if every company allows you to, like, gives you the permission. So you can
So
actually
the
pretty much bring.
API pulls to what kind of content?
So let's say Crunchbase has all the data that you need for a given profile. They actually allow you to like pull it into your own app if you're creating your own app. Of
For a
course, based
price.
on for
For
a
a
price.
price.
Yes, for a
Ah, okay.
price. So
Ah,
I
okay.
think building data sets today is actually the easiest thing if you honestly ask me. I mean, even validating it or building it, but
Right.
running right queries, right? Running what people would want and creating those algorithms, right, is the most difficult thing. So I think we are more on to trying to understand much more clearer what it is. So we have the runway right now for this, and that's how we are able to like expand this. But we will be raising money in about 7 months time, because our MVP will be ready in terms of the intelligence platform, and then we're going to like be raising money thereon.
Got it. Um, Nice. So usually, something a building media estate, a tech media estate itself can be overwhelming in terms of the opportunities that you can pursue, right? So how do you ensure that you do not distract yourself with everything and everything that you want to do? Okay, let's do reporting, let's do analysis, let's compete with an analyst. How do you prioritize your what do you want to offer? And this is mostly a product question, right? So how do you come up
Yeah.
with a roadmap, and where do you want to invest, which are the, because there could be multiple avenues to make revenue once you are able to gain a lot of inbound traffic and it's becoming popular and suddenly it achieves the momentum, and then you want to
Right.
sell data and stuff like, how do you prioritize where the next set of
So
opportunity should?
yeah, for us, media is not a revenue run. So we are very clear, because if you want to do a media run, if you want to do a revenue run on the media, then the model is only ads or collabs, right? So there's no other revenue model out there for a media house, whether it's traditional or digital. And that's where, if you actually I honestly believe the bedrock of you building a product is, what is your revenue pipeline. And I think if you're very clear about it, then your priorities are there.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. Second thing for us, Ravi, is more in terms of we're very clear how we have demarked teams. So we work in modular teams. So when I say modular, in a sense, let's say we know that this team, let's say a team of two journalists, one data analyst, and one graphic designer is enough to produce this many number of stories. So we know we work in modules like that, in a modular format. So our expansion works like that. So we're very predictable with our expansion. But since it is we're not looking at revenue from there, and it's uh, rightly so, as you said, it could bring a lot of inbound traffic. It could actually help us uh, uh, get a lot of reach at this point of time. That's why we invest in it, but we know how much we want to invest in it. So we have a good editorial team, right? And in fact, we are hiring a couple of strong editors who have actually done that at a big scale, and it'll be their game, right? And it's a very set game, a predictable game that runs, which is doing a magazine, running events, and basically running our online portal. So we're not under no pressure to produce X amount of stories, because we have subscribers who are awaiting to read our stories. So that pressure is not there. So that's not our revenue model, right? But our main focus right now is to build a large data team, and we have a strong tech team to be able to build this like intelligence and procurement platform. And that's where our real focus is, right? So
Got it.
we know what matters for us at this given point of time, so our priorities get distributed. So for us, we want to ultimately build a SaaS management platform. Makes it much easier for somebody to discover even it's a small business. So I have seen, like, for example, small businesses in India. I'll give you the general behavior, right? They search for the search term could be something like free CRM platform, right? Because as a small business, you don't have the money and you're trying to like maximize, right? We are totally understand, right? Similarly, as a mid level or mid market and solution would actually look for, probably would replace the word free with affordable. I'm talking about specific to India at this point of time. Whereas enterprises would actually look at secure CRM platform, or they would use other terms, right? So what I mean by that is that different people are looking for different things that's not being catered to in a much more effective way. And that's what we want to be really catering to, right, through what we're trying to build. So that's where our priorities are, that's what we're trying to build. And whatever queries come to us, we should be able to like effectively show, and it should be able to like end up in activations, right, in product activations, not just in a buy. So for us, it's also about product adoption. So one of the things I forgot to also
So
mention
help,
is,
help me understand. Do you only publish content of your existing clients?
no,
Or no, right? So how
no.
do you check activations then if they're not clients? I mean, what if somebody reads your content
No,
and
so
then
at this point, yeah, at this point of time, we are not built that part yet. In terms of what I was talking about in terms of SaaS management, right? But we also want, when we build that, we also want to be looking at activations, and we also want to be looking at whether adoptions are happening. I'll give you a simple example. We bought a survey tool very recently, and we bought it at enterprise minus one, right? So there were four tiers and enterprise minus one. We have bought it. We bought about 10 licenses. Till now I haven't had anybody call me, and it's been more than 1.5 months, or email me saying that how are you using, what's the use case you've been solving for. And it's actually very, I find it very, very crazy, because end of the day, I expected somebody to actually show up, so at least to tell, hey, this is how you can use this, or we can set up a like call with you. So you're not actually helping somebody derive an ROI within a time frame. And let's say if we don't adopt to it, then after 2 months, as a team, we will actually decide saying that I think this didn't make sense. And switching cost is so easy in SaaS. Say, okay, you know what, I think we switch to some other platform. So a
yeah,
lot
that
of
is,
times,
that is exactly why you said CSM is so important. Customer success is so
exactly,
important
so
for time to
important.
value, stickiness and stuff.
Yes, absolutely, and that gets missed, right? And everybody has a different use case, and not everybody is coming for what you're showing them, and you will be surprised how they're going to use your product. Like they would find, in India you use the word jugaad, right? They would use it for a new, like for a lack of a better word, they'll innovate it, right? There's been innovation usage out there. So a lot of times I think companies don't realize that, and because they run with lean teams, they're not able to dedicate resources. But in fact, you could still do that with probably having a good chat bot or a good help desk software. Even there, we don't find answers to a lot of questions, right? So honestly, we feel that adoption is a very important aspect. But can we really help companies who don't have teams adopt to products? And we feel yes, we can do that, and we can do that by actually showing how different people use this product in a different way, and that actually gives them the strength to, like, expand and adopt.
Got it. So you mentioned that your content is not meant for mass consumption,
Yes,
and it is for niche
yes,
decision makers. So
yes.
if like, I mean, let me quickly share the screen here. But I see, like, you report, say, okay, there is a new okay, Scalepe is arrival to Klarna, and then you say, okay,
No, I
this
mean, this is changing completely, Ravi. So in on March, when you look at March 1st, when you go and look at our platform, you'll
got it,
completely see a whole new thing out there. So right now, we have not put it out there
got it, got it,
as of yet, right?
got it.
Uh,
But
but
you have really good strategic content in your editor speak. So I for today I see that there is news, okay, which is about
right.
any company, any startups raising money or something of that sort. But
Mhm.
here I see you mentioned about the SaaS in China and regulatory compliances. So I think this is more like decision makers and stuff like that.
Yes, yes. I just shared a link on our chat, and then if you click that, I think you will be able to get a preview of what's to come in like in couple of days, right? So yeah,
Is this is the one?
this is the one. Yes, yes.
Okay.
So we just
I think your mic went it got disturbed.
are you able to hear me now?
You are back, but it seems like a distant echo from you now.
Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yeah, you're back now. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I think if you really scroll down, you'll be able to see some of our reports that we are going to be publishing, and it kind of gives you good idea of what's to come, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so this
Oh,
is yeah, yeah. So this is going to be our new platform with a login with membership, where
oh, lovely.
you'll be able to read content only if you're a member, and membership is free. I mean, it's just that we want to know who is reading our content, and so on and
Got
so
it.
forth. So yeah,
Okay. Membership is free.
yeah,
You just get their credentials.
exactly.
Okay.
Credentials. So you can bookmark what you're reading. You can, like, have a view and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah. This looks like a full-fledged portal, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Nice.
I think we're
Nice.
going very step by step, Ravi. So we're trying to understand what the market wants. So we're not under any pressure to create like a full-fledged product and then launch. So for us, it's step by step process, but it's trying to validate what the market wants, what SaaS founders are struggling really, really with today.
Right.
Um, where is the leakage? Because what we see is that, see, if you look at any company, they spend close to about 50% of their monthly expense goes on marketing and sales, and they're hopeful that that will translate into something meaningful.
Right.
And when you do the calculations, the customer acquisition cost is really like shooting way, way, way beyond what they should be spending, right?
Got it.
In the hope that, and of course, I should also take it with a pinch of salt. It's a venture-led game, so end of the day, a Series A investor is interested in the Series B investor coming in.
Right.
So if you show growth, even with discounted cash flow,
Hmm.
then it still works because you're discounting it now. You're giving them 1 year trial, but you're bringing people inside. It's still okay in that sense, because a Series B person says, okay, it's worth for me to invest because I see there's a Series C potential,
Right.
and the whole thing continues. But now the interesting part, what we notice, is that investors also are careful now, because they understand that when it reaches the market finally and an IPO is floated, it's not meeting the market, right, where it should be meeting. So they want to be very wary of the bloatedness that's like floating out there, and they want to bring that down at to a level that is acceptable, right? So
Got it.
that's where it is. Yeah.
So if somebody is listening to this podcast and they would be willing to take your consulting, do you have a filter, or do you offer your consulting to all kinds of startups?
At this point of time, our ideal customer profile is Series A and Series B companies, and it's not that we don't love bootstrapped companies or seed companies, but just that Series A and Series B have a slightly matured marketing and sales play in action, and so a lot of things that we're trying to do would is a direct use case for them. Whereas for we definitely will expand to pre-series A and post-series B. But series A and series B are the companies that we're trying to solve at this point of time, because they receive money, and the money they receive has a very critical OKR. That the money is given for, and usually they're no longer raising money to build product, right? They're raising money right now to expand, and
Do
that
you
is
do
where.
you work directly with these companies, or do you also work with investors so that the investors can hire you in supporting their
No, we don't work with investors, because end of the day, when we work with investors, and let's say they bring a portfolio of 5 companies, then they direct the narrative. We don't have any it becomes slightly challenging. It's good for revenue, definitely, but it's very bad when tomorrow the challenge would be that, are we really fair in what we are publishing? Is our publication trustworthy? And those are real questions that, like, we want to stay aloof. So if anybody is giving you, let's say, a portfolio of 5 companies or 6 companies, it becomes a challenge, right? So we have had people approaching us, and some investment houses approaching us, but the challenge is that that's a challenge, because end of the day, from word of mouth, thankfully, it actually right now it works because one, when somebody comes, they benefit from this, then they share with others. So it's been easy. We have a very small sales team at this point of time, so thankfully word of mouth is converting for us. But investment houses would be a challenge at this point of time, Ravi, because end of the day we will be at their mercy and they're at their behest, and we
Yeah.
don't want to play that game.
Got it. And since you are mentioning this, I see this as a big potential, right? There are so many startups being funded every day. I don't think the investors have the bandwidth also to support them. So they all they do is fund them, and then they are left to fend for themselves. So I see this
Yeah.
big potential of players like you who can handhold these Series A, Series B customers in scaling up their businesses, both in sales and marketing. Is there anything more that you also offer other than scaling sales and marketing? What are the areas,
So,
what are the revenues you help with?
so end of the day, when I spoke to any founder, right, for them, it's all about straight line to money, straight line to revenue, right?
Right.
So for them, that's the conversation that they say, and what they add with that is, hey, our point of view is never getting covered. So, like for example, last week I was having a conversation, and the person said they put us in conversational intelligence, category, but we are much more than that. We are not conversational intelligence, right? Because
Right.
our use cases go way, way beyond that. So that's the challenge that we see. So traditional media houses or digital media houses are covering them, but they're covering them not from a point of view, right? So that's a big challenge that they see, and of course, it's a straight line to money. On the other side, for enterprises, it's all identifying the right kind of buyers, right? So for them, the real challenge is vendor discovery, digital transformation. So everyone says digital transformation, but what is digital transformation? How does it break? What is a digital maturity model, let's say, for sales? What's a digital maturity model, let's say, for HR, right? So they are not very clear with that, so everybody uses these terms very loosely. There's no
Right.
like parameter to somebody to check and say, okay, at this digital maturity scale, this is where I am. If I adopt these things, then I think we are completely mature, right? In that sense, let's take for example leave management system, just as give an example. So right now the leave management system is not very intuitive, right? So end of the day, there's no way that I can actually put it in my chatbot and say I'm taking a leave, and automatically gets registered in a place, right? So it is again, I have to go to my portal, I have to apply for a leave, and there's so many things that are there. So when you look at digital adoption, curve, or the maturity curve, and the adoption against it is not that great. Third is product adoption, and the fourth is purchase guidance. So that becomes a challenge. Same guidance that companies need for buyer discovery and guidance, right? How do you really like work with these kind of companies? For example, how many SaaS companies actually outside US, or outside Europe, sorry, are entering into Europe, and why are they not entering Europe?
Mm.
So if you really look at it, there are very few success stories, right? So why are companies not entering left, right, and center? Why are they entering only after the raise Series C?
Right.
So these are very interesting questions to really ask. And it's not that you're in Europe right now.
Yes.
It's not that difficult, by the way, to do business, right? I
Right.
mean, there is a small gap that's there. I understand that the way Europe transacts business and the way US transacts business is pulls apart. I understand that, but
But it's not a big challenge. It's a lack of familiarity and lack of knowledge.
yes,
And
exactly. So why this gap is not, yeah. So why this
I know
gap is not being,
yes.
I'm so
I
sorry,
know of a
please go
good
ahead.
friend. Sorry, I know of a good friend. I just had a call with him. He is an expert in pharmaceuticals. Okay, he has worked
Mhm.
in Germany for the last 15 years, and today he is minting money only consulting pharmaceutical companies in India on how to open their or grow their share in Europe. He charges $2,000 an hour for consulting, and he converts them and then they retain him, and he's just minting money, single person consultant for all the pharmaceutical companies to grow their business in Germany. So massive potential, because we only hear about US and India. This big market always
So I
is a
think
lesson. You're muted. You got yourself
I'm
muted.
sorry.
Yeah.
Now I'm back. Yeah, LATAM is a huge market. Nobody talks about LATAM. So I think there are bigger markets that nobody taps into and doesn't look into and transact. And as you rightly said, there's a lack of knowledge, right? And so for them, Europe is Series C. When I do Series C, I'll think about Europe, not now, right? So we want to change that. We want to change that whole thing and say, hey, I think if you have customers, you should actually like service them there, and you're losing a lot of revenue on the table because you're not expanding in the right given time, right? So I think those are the things that same with we see some amazing European startups, but they don't transact in US or in India,
Right.
right? They only come to US to raise funds. So they will set up a Delaware or a Wyoming, raise
That
funds.
that is so true. I work in a European pan-European company startup,
Right,
and yes,
right.
yeah. So
Right. So you raise money, but you still serve largely Europe, but you're not expanding when you had the opportunity to expand. So I think these are things that we're seeing can actually grow in a larger way, because there's enough and more opportunity and pathway to it. It's not that it's difficult. It's just that it's unknown. So I think those are the things that we're looking at, Ravi.
got it. I wanted to understand. I'm sure with your knowledge, although you are not like a TechCrunch
Yeah,
or your story in India, so they are mass market, as you said. Um,
Ravi, I don't see you. I
you don't see me.
No. Your video has just gone off. Like probably you want to like stop your cam and start your cam, maybe.
My video has gone off. And why is that? Camera. Oops. You're right. You're right. My video has gone off. And since we are at the fag end of this conversation,
No
uh,
issues.
what happened? Yeah, because I saw a blink that
Yeah.
happened on my
So
screen,
probably
and
you could stop your cam and start your cam. Maybe that could work. I'm not sure.
yeah, stop cam, and then start cam. Add myself to the stream. Okay, something has gone wrong. So I'm sorry. So we'll have to continue like that. Okay. So
No problem.
as I said, we are wrapping up. My
Yeah,
question,
you talk about TechCrunch, and your story. Yeah.
your story. So what is their business model? If you, are you aware of a business model for them?
So I mean, if you look at TechCrunch, of course, TechCrunch, business model is little difficult to predict because of the holding company behind them, right? When
Hmm.
they started off, it was a totally different. I mean, Michael and Keith. Yeah, you're back. So,
Yeah,
excuse.
Joseph. Now you're gone. You're back
Sorry,
again.
my
Yes.
bad. I went for a quick sneeze and came back. So that,
No
yeah.
worries.
So
Joseph.
sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I'm back. So, in terms of Michael and Keith, when they started TechCrunch, I mean, they both actually, TechCrunch has a very interesting history. It started actually by venture capitalists. I don't know if you know that. So, it started by a venture firm, and after that they sold it to AOL, and of course it changed hands. It went to Verizon Media, and it made a lot of rounds, right?
Right.
So TechCrunch model, is slightly different because it works more as right now as funding flowing in from the holding company, and then they run it. Not necessarily they're making money through ads. Ads could be a very, very small component for them, and they run TechCrunch Disrupt. I also get to hear that they also do deals with straight off equity deals as well, right? So something of those kinds that I've heard. But your story, is a straight off ad led growth and collabs, to it could be co-branded stuff that they're doing together. So
Right.
the challenge with that is, it's very difficult because how many people actually read entrepreneurship? That's a very big question to ask. How many people actually there's a segment of entrepreneurs and there's a segment of people who want to be entrepreneurs.
Right.
So there's a very very small segment out there. Um,
Right.
but in terms of infra that they've built is pretty huge. In terms of distribution, what they've built is really amazing.
Right.
But that's why I think for them, where I see a challenge is that raising money in a digital tech setup is very difficult because you're not able to actually show the kind of growth that you want to show,
Right.
and subscriptions are not growth in that sense, right? So it becomes a bit of a challenge there. And I really have a lot of admiration for Shraddha Sharma because I grew up in Bihar in my childhood. Shraddha comes from there, and I
Yeah.
know how difficult it is for a Patna girl to go out there, work in CNBC, and then start something as a woman founder. Got a lot of admiration for her, for what she has built and what she's been able to do, and
And she was the
amazing
early player, right? So at that
early
time,
player.
tech
Exactly.
media was
Yes.
not there. Okay, there used to
Yes.
be TV tech media. I'm
Yes.
forgetting the name, but CNBC's, there was this another woman who was very very popular. And so these were one or two women who used to cover tech in TV, but digital
Yes.
media, I think Shraddha Sharma was the first one.
First, yeah, absolutely. So I think it took off, but where the challenge lies is that I think they don't touch on issues that could actually matter, right? So, for example, we want to actually, when it comes to media houses, as I said, we want to be in the intersection of all this. But mainly, like if I look at India as a landscape, um, how many founders actually know what are the grants that Startup India or the government has for them that they can actually access today,
Right.
right? And to actually make it as public as possible.
Right.
Uh, to lobby, because as a media house, I mean, in India you can't lobby legally, but as a media house you can rake up some very important issues and talk
Right.
about like see when we talk about startup world, there's a lot of nice stuff that you hear, but it doesn't get translated into reality. So there are a lot of things like that you could actually take off and permeate that whole narrative in that sense, right? The other thing, so for me, if I see them expanding really well, they're going, but their business is totally different, right? So their business is more on reporting what's happening on ground,
Right.
and to that extent they are more of a news stand, whereas we are taking a whole angle of being a magazine, and then moving to intelligence, right? So magazine to intelligence is our model. So I think that there's a big difference in the models, but I love what they have built, extremely strong, and distribution is extremely strong. The only thing I really feel is that with the data that they have and the landscape that they've built, I think they could actually do a lot more than that. Yeah, I do
Yeah,
see captive. Yes.
I'm sure. So there are these new players. I do not think Captable is new. I think they have been for a couple of years. So they. Oh, I did not realize Captable is actually a Your Story product, or did they
Your
buy
story
it?
product. No. It's a
Uh,
your story product. It was incubated from your story.
okay, so I think so. While the Your Story is mass product, they have come up with subscribers only,
Yeah,
premium
very
only.
similar. I mean, they are trying to compete with VCC Circle. Uh,
Okay,
so RVC Circle. So the point is here that subscription models are very difficult to run. By the way, I mean in India, see in India everybody in Jugadu, right? So in India it's
right.
very difficult to run. See, point here is Ravi. Question that people always ask is why should I pay for content? So it's a very interesting question that people ask always, right?
But
Why should I
in
pay
niche
for?
in niche areas, content and newsletters are a multi-million dollar companies. Niche, okay. Like for example,
Absolutely.
I've seen this newsletter company, which is trends.co, or the Hustle. Okay,
Yes.
so
Sampar, yes, absolutely. Yes.
Sampar. And I was just looking at their revenue model. They have more than 2,000 subscribers, and their annual fee structure is $235, okay, as a
Yes.
subscription, and
Actually,
1,700
you could check something called trends.vc. I mean, it's very, very, very interesting guy. Trends.vc, very, very interesting. I mean, what he does is he provides you a research framework, okay, and
Mhm.
it's very, very, very interesting. He charges you close to about $350 or $300 a year, but
Okay.
gives you it's very, very interesting. Yeah. So Drew, if you're watching this, I got your subscriber.
Okay, follow trends. Rah, rah, rah. So help me understand. So what they do is they have a team of
You can
researchers,
you can
and
actually go, yeah, become a trends pro. Just can you click that? Yeah. So you will actually get what it is, right? So you just scroll down. You get market reports, or
so it says
every
1,000 plus successful entrepreneurs discovering new
yes.
markets and ideas. Okay,
So
featured
you
on
get, yeah, you can just click any of that. I don't know if it's clickable. Paid communities, anything that's clickable.
no, it's not clickable.
Not clickable. Okay, so you get research on all of this, by the way, each of it, right?
And
And
these are very, very relevant topics. NFTs,
very
paid.
relevant, and it's very well researched, by the way.
Okay,
And you get a bigger report, and more than that, you also, if you scroll down, they have office hours. Yeah, so all of this, right? So they have meetups, like join masterminds, upcoming reports, and all of that.
join
So
weekly
Ravi, the
meetups.
model here is it's community, right? So you're building a very strong, this is a community model, right? Whereas our what we are trying to build is more for the enterprise world, wherein it is more in terms of the information and intelligence that they need is relevant for them in
Hmm.
that specific way.
Got it. Got it.
But this is
Yeah.
this
So
is
this
very,
is
very
this is the
interesting.
niche model. This is niche model,
Yes.
and yours is also niche, but larger players. I think these are individual businesses, small
Yes.
businesses. This is
Yes.
how I see, and because if you see low code, no code is not, it's still
Microsoft.
a far cry
Yeah.
for big enterprises, right? So micro SaaS, paid newsletters. So this is for the creator economy, is how
Yes.
I see it. Okay, marketing funnel, angel investing. Excellent. I mean, lots of activity happening, and thank you. I just realized we are 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 90 minutes into this, but I could keep
Yeah.
talking. So
Yes.
again,
Yeah, likewise.
Joseph, thanks so much for sharing your wealth of wisdom with us, and all the best for SaaS industry, and looking
Thank
forward
you,
to.
Ravi.
I'm also following all the action that happens on LinkedIn. You have massive
Thank you.
followership also there, so looking forward to all the exciting things that are gonna come in the future days. So thanks for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you. Same here. Same here. Likewise. It's really nice catching up with you. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thanks, Joseph.